Hi, I'm Barbara Morrow at the Northshire Bookstore. I am so pleased to have with us today Jane Klonsky, who has written a most amazing book, Unconditional, Older Dogs, Deeper Love. Jane, it's so great to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
Well, Jane, this is so exciting. We're so happy to be celebrating your wonderful book about older dogs and their owners. Can you tell me a little bit about how you conceived of this project and got started with it? And also, I know it's been several years since you started this. Can you give us a little bit of the history of it?
Well, in 5 words or less, let's try. I've been a professional photographer for over 30 years. I've always had a passion for dogs. And it was just one day, it was sat in the back of my mind someplace. I needed to do something to combine those passions. And about a little over 4 years ago, I was sitting in my insurance broker's office here in Manchester, Pin and Stone. It was Angela Arbelina, and she had her big bulldog on a bed right next to her, and she had her hand on her dog, and it was just right then and there that I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to photograph people and their really deep relationships with their dogs. So I asked Angela if we could take pictures, and she could be my first subject. Anyway, she told me that Clementine, big beautiful Clementine, was diagnosed with cancer and only had a few weeks to live. So we arranged to photograph the next day. The pictures were fabulous. Clementine lived another 10 months. And because of those pictures and those images, they were poignant, they were just heartfelt, beautiful, that I knew that not only did I want to photograph people in their relationship with their dogs, but I really wanted to, I wanted a subset. I wanted the older dogs. There was something just really special about the older dogs and what they could teach us about life and how special they were. So I set off, it was a passion. I just knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to create a body of work. But I didn't have a book. There was no book even thinking of an end product at the time. So I started photographing. I started photographing friends and friends and friends of friends, and then friends of friends and friends of friends. And and then I just, it just kept on evolving and growing and developed a life of its own.
That is amazing. And then it started to evolve into a book, basically, or the concept of a book. Is that right?
Yes, it took a few years. I traveled. I became associated with several big organizations around the country, and I collected pictures. And then I collected what I thought was really important was everybody who I photographed wrote a story for me about their relationship, and so, which added another depth to the photos.
That is such a unique aspect, I think. But still, at that point,
no book.
It was just something
I always just thought I was going to. It was a passion project for me. I knew I wanted to share it somehow, somewhere. I didn't know where. It wasn't important to me at the time. I knew it would happen. And a few years into the project, like 2 years into the project, I think a lot of people did say, you need to make a book out of this. Book would be great. So it was then that I thought that I started shopping it around a bit.
And shopping around a bit, that can be very tedious, I know, from talking to many authors, how difficult that can be.
It can be tedious, it can be frustrating. It's not for the faint of heart, I think. I had many rejections.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I had maybe 20 rejections.
Oh.
And I had a couple of almost, really almost.
I remember.
But for whatever reason,
Yep.
They fell through. And then I just put it on a back burner for a while. But I didn't, it was discouraging, but I still knew what I was doing was important to people. I had a story to
Absolutely.
tell. I had photos to share. So I just kept going. And then it was a random submission to National Geographic about 6 months after I thought, and because we'd never submitted anything to them in the beginning group. And they just said, fabulous, great.
What a perfect combination. National Geographic, which obviously focuses on photographs and photography, and the photographs that you had put together over a 3-year period, that it just seems like such a perfect match to me. Getting back to the actual process, what was it like talking to a lot of these people? I mean, who had dogs that were in the latter parts of their lives, and it must have been very poignant.
It was, I think, more poignant than I ever expected it to be. Because you have to remember, when I traveled around the country, they weren't people that I knew. So I was connected with people, so I went into people's homes. I met people for the first time and their dogs for the first time, and they shared stories with me. They shared their passions. They shared their connection with their dog, their love of their dog. I found that it was, in so many cases, it wasn't just the person, the dog, who loved the person. It was a total give and take. It was how that dog was helping and what that dog was giving to the person, as much as what the person was giving to the dog. So, and just to be able to share these really intimate relationships. One of the hardest things I found was really to get people to express themselves in words. I just thought it was a great idea, and I thought it would be easy, and it wasn't. But people thanked me for that they were able to really sit down and express themselves.
I think writing can be so cathartic.
Yeah.
And once you start writing, things come out that you probably never even thought were there or you didn't recognize. So that was brilliant, actually, having the owners talk about their relationships with their dogs. And how many portraits?
In the book, well, first of all, I photographed over 300 people and dogs. So for the book, 60, I think it's 65 were selected. And sometimes there's just one picture, and sometimes there's several pictures, because they wanted to make it sort of a scrapbooky kind of a feel, that you feel like you really got to know the person.
So National Geographic did the final selection?
We did it together.
You did it together. Yeah, that makes sense. Good.
And that was hard too, because wasn't necessarily all my favorites, or the ones that if I just picked based on a photo, they might have been certain images. And then if I just went in and picked just based on the stories, it would have been possibly other people and dogs that were picked. So, and then it was dogs or people to represent different areas of the country, different kinds of dogs, big dogs, little dogs, black dogs, white dogs, rescue dogs, purebred dogs, and different kinds of people. So it kind of had to satisfy a lot of different criteria. Not an easy process.
Not an easy process. Can you describe maybe one of the stories that stands out for you?
Sure. God, there's so many. It's so hard.
You had mentioned Nablina.
Oh gosh, Tim and Nablina.
Tim and Nablina.
Yes. So I went down to
Nablina,
Massachusetts.
excuse me. Nablina is on page 27 for anybody who wants to check that out.
Okay. It's actually one of my favorite images in the book. And the reason is to me, it just the one photo that tells the story of the unconditional love that flows back and forth from the person to the dog and back and forth. They're just looking at each other head to head, and they're just sharing this moment. Tim is a woodworker, a fine woodworker. He, geez, I guess 17 years ago, he traveled with a group of friends down to Mexico, and he saw this poor puppy on the side of the road, one of these, stray dogs. And there was just something that felt special to him. And he was full of fleas, he was a mess. And he just knew the minute he picked that dog up, he would never let the dog go. Anyway, that was what happened. He did get the dog across the border and got the dog back to Vermont and opened the door, and there was snow for the first time. Anyway, 17 years later, they were together, you know, nonstop, 24/7. And their road just, it traveled through different times in their life, and I think traveled through the dog getting older. You know, the dog used to bike with him for, 20, 30 miles a day, run with him, and now, the dog drives in the car with him, or they share the bed or the couch.
It's amazing.
So it's just a progression of life together.
And you collected hundreds of these stories.
Yes.
Yes. One of the things that interested me is that different breeds of dogs live to different ages, basically. So an older dog of one breed is not necessarily an older dog of a different breed, right? I mean, some of your dogs are 8 years old and considered old, and some are 12 and considered old. Is that right?
Or 17.
Or 17.
Yeah.
Some dogs live...
So there's a photo in here in a story about Walt the Great Dane. And he was 9 when I took some of the pictures. And he was old at 9. He had 2, knees done, hip done.
Oh my goodness.
But he did great. He was doing great.
Sounds like a lot of my friends.
Exactly. Sounds like my friends too. Yes. Funny thing about that. But I think, these big dogs are just bred differently. Their hearts are, they're different size. Their bones are harder to, it's all just more difficult. So they get older at a young age. So if a Great Dane lives till 8 or 10 years old, it's good. So, but then you have like Nablina, Tim and Nablina. Nablina's a mutt, and mutts usually, have the best of both of, the mommy and the daddy. So, and they usually live not all the time, but longer than a purebred dog. But then you get a little dog, like a Yorkshire Terrier, let's say, or some kind of little dog like that. And 15, it's an easy age for them.
So interesting. Yeah. I guess it's a little bit like people. I mean, you have different genes, and some people live longer than others.
Yeah.
Jane, you've been a photographer most of your adult life. Is that right?
35 plus years.
30. So a good part of your adult life. What did you do before you did this project?
Well, first of all, I was a psychologist. And then I went from psychology to photography, which actually really helped with this whole process. And I think it has a lot to do with why I did this book, how I did this book, how I deal with people, how I deal with my shoots and meeting people. So it's definitely helped me. But I started photography professionally with the New York City Marathon back in 1978 with my husband. He rented a helicopter, and 684 feet above the water. He wasn't tied in, he was hanging out. I was on top of the bridge. And I remember he bowed to me and I kind of waved at him, but I had a cable on, so even if I went over, I would have been attached. And but we photographed and got we did some award-winning and posters and ads of all these people running over the beginning of the New York City Marathon. Because of that, and it was just a passion at the time. This was something we wanted to do. We started photographing. We were the official photographers for the New York City Marathon for 10 years. We started a lot of sports photography. We rented a studio in Carnegie Hall in New York City, right above the concert hall. We could hear the music perfectly. We did a lot of big Madison Avenue, worked with Madison Avenue advertising agencies. We did campaigns for companies like Adidas, Head Tennis, Nike, Puma, So we did that for 15 years maybe, and we used to pass each other in airports. I mean, it was the fast life. It was, you know, it really was. And then we decided that there has to be a better way. We needed to get out of this rat race. And we
Sounds
convinced,
somewhat familiar, actually.
it does, huh?
Yeah.
See? Probably to a lot of people who live up in Vermont.
Yes, exactly.
And we decided we wanted to travel and get out of New York City. So we made a pitch to the Image Bank, which was our stock photo house, and Kodak. Remember Kodak? When it was in its heyday?
They did film?
Yeah. And anyway, they sent us on a trip. They sponsored a trip for us where we traveled around the United States for a year and a half in a big custom-built RV. We traveled with our 2 Great Danes, and I had Great Danes at the time, Molly and Otto, and they had I've loved dogs forever, and there was no way I was taking a trip for a year and a half without my dogs. So they traveled with us, and at the end of that trip, we wanted to find Brian Cumwell said on the Today Show, because they followed us too, that Arthur and Jane wanted to find the perfect small town in America to move to. We moved to Vermont, we moved to Landgrove, and continued photography, continued traveling around the world, but concentrated more on stock photography then, and raising my daughter, who was born at the end of this trip.
Fantastic. Well, I know you have traveled all over the world.
Yeah.
Some really out-of-the-way places as well. Can you talk a little bit about that, your foreign travel? You were in Burma and Vietnam.
Burma, Vietnam, Kenya. When Casey was growing up, when she developed a real passion for the camera, and so she would travel with us. And then I did some nonprofit work in Papua New Guinea with Casey, and Jamaica. So those are just some of the places, and we've traveled a ton now.
You have?
Yeah, and with our photography.
And now?
And now with this book too.
You will.
The book has taken us, and Casey has done a video series, so she's brought a lot of these still photographs to life. So she has a video series, Unconditional Stories, and she's met me in Alaska, California, Vermont, Illinois. So
how wonderful that you can share your passion with your daughter, who is also a photographer.
Right.
Right.
It's the best.
It's the best. It is. Yeah. So I just want to mention that the Northshire Bookstore is going to be launching Jane's book on October 28th at 6:30 here at the bookstore, and we invite everybody to come here to celebrate with Jane, because this is a really big deal.
Thank you.
It's I think birthing a book is very, very special. So many people, in my experience, have a book in them, or think they do at least. And I've worked with so many different authors who bring a passion to their writing and to their project. And my husband and Ed and I have watched you over the last 3 years working on this book, and getting a lot of advice from different people, and really trying to bring it to life. And I think that this is it's very exciting.
Ed would remember, because before this became a book, or even before I started even pitching it, I would call Ed.
Yes.
And Ed would meet me in the cafe, and I would ask him all kinds of questions, and he was great.
Yeah.
So
good.
he was wonderful, helping guide me in the beginning.
Yeah, great. So I wonder if there's anything else that you want to tell us about the book. We've talked about your travel. We've talked about Oh, I know one thing that is again very poignant is the point that some of these dogs that you got to know have actually died and passed on, and how difficult that is for you, obviously, and for their owners.
Oh, absolutely. When I started collecting the photos and the stories, and I knew that I wanted to do people and their older dogs, I just never thought that we were going to lose these older dogs. It didn't register. I just didn't think about it. So that when the first dogs, people, I've stayed in contact with almost everybody, that people would write me and say that, Blackie, just passed away yesterday after, whatever. It just like hit me to the core. And I just didn't realize how overwhelmed I'd be too. And I know that each individual has been really overwhelmed. But I also know that I feel like I was a bit helpful, and because I do have a website and social media pages, so we could share stories and photos, and then we would share their stories or and some of the pictures, and maybe do a tribute. And then the outpouring of people from all over the world that would write in and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, or I had the same kind of dog, or the same, I lost my dog last week. So it was really pretty special.
That is amazing. And you have become very much an advocate and a participant in social media, I know.
Yes, didn't know the first thing about it, never knew what a tweet was.
And you have a Facebook page, and you have a website, and you communicate.
Instagram, Twitter, do blogs.
Wow. I mean, that in itself can be full-time, I imagine. But you have all the material for it.
I have all the material for it, which is great.
Yeah.
And I also know it is a different day and age now. I mean, we have to do it.
Yep.
We have to do it. I mean, that's where people are finding us, and that's where we're getting, that's where I can get my stories and my photos out, and people will find me. They'll know now there's a book, and that there are other stories, and I understand. It's the evolving world, and
you're lucky that you have the ability to be able to do it. I don't think all of us would have that ability necessarily, but I mean, being a photographer gives you a leg up, I think, in terms of understanding all of the technology and so on.
Yeah, but I'm still, we're the same era, so
yeah.
we're a little bit of dinosaurs here. But no, it's okay. It's okay.
Good for you. I think our time is just about up, but I do want to remind everybody again that we are launching Jane's book, Unconditional: Older Dogs, Deeper Love, on October 28th here at the Northshire Bookstore, and we invite you all to come and celebrate with her. There'll be champagne, and Jane will be doing a slideshow, or a PowerPoint, I guess you call it now. And we'll see a lot of the photographs from the book and hear some of the stories that are just amazing. So thank you, Jane, so much for being here.
Oh gosh, it's my pleasure. And I can't wait till the launch. Couldn't be in a better place.
Great, great.
Thanks, Barbara.